So in tonight's episode, we're going to be looking at the multicam feature and what to do if this fails in you. Welcome back, guys. It's Byron Phillips from ByronPhillipsMedia.com, and tonight, like the title suggests, we are going to be looking at the multicam feature, and in the eventuality that this doesn't work for you, what you can do as manual steps in order to get this to work. Not the actual multicam feature itself, but actually setting up the timeline, setting up the cameras and everything so that you can do this within the layers rather than the actual feature itself. This happened the very first time that I tried to use the multicam feature, and what I found was these files, for some reason, the majority of them just wouldn't sync. Since that video, it has been repeatedly working, so obviously it was a one-off issue that I was facing, but I thought it'd be a good time to show you what you will have to do if your bag is up against the wall and you really need to get this done. So dependent on the camera that you're using, for instance, using the same files, we've got the G7, which are these two, and then we've got the not the Note, sorry, but the Samsung S9 and the Note 10. So for this demonstration, we're just going to be using the Note 10 and the G7 because the audio on the actual S9 was horrific due to the Edelkrone motion control system. It was picking up awful on the internal microphone on the actual phone, so we will leave that one for the time being. But for tonight, we will use G7 and the Note 10. So the way that we're going to achieve this is that we need to create additional timelines for these so that they become one clip. Now with the G7, these actually they don't overlap, so as one is finishing, the next clip plays and there is no overlap with the audio or the video, so you don't have to adjust anything. This isn't the case with the Note 10. What I'm finding with using Filmic Pro, there'll probably be half a second between the old clip and the new clip where the same data is there and there's an overlap. So you've got to sync that up so that they just play seamlessly. So then that way, then when you go to do a multicam timeline, you've got a better chance of actually getting it the way you want to. So the way that we're going to achieve this, we're going to create two bins, one for the G7 and another for the Note 10. And then for the G7, we're just going to drag these in, and we're gonna drag the clips for the Note 10 over there. So once we're in the G7 folder, we are going to create a new timeline. That's going to be loaded, and what we're going to do, just make sure that is, we're just going to drag these clips in. Now this one is going to be straightforward. Like I said, we don't get any overlap, so as this is finishing, this will play and there's no skipping or there's no issue. It just looks like one seamless track. And the reason why we are doing this is that if we go back to master and then we load our timeline, if we go to the G7 and pull this in, if you notice, that timeline is one seamless timeline now. So there are no cuts in between. Ignore that. But there are no cuts in between now. And we want to do the exact same thing with the Note 10. The difference with the Note 10 is that there is an overlap. So like before, we will create a new timeline. Like this, and we will drag this in, and we will drag this in. Now we're only going to stick to these two clips just to give you an idea of what's involved, rather than trying to do all three today. We'll literally just go through the first two. Just gonna move that across. So I'm not sure, we'll just play. So at any point now, see, it's that word twice. The word backup is in there twice. So you've got that repeating effect at this point. So you want to get this to play as seamlessly as possibly can. Now, depending on how long your video is, you can decide to ignore this. It is half a second, and just try not to cut to a point that is here, or you can decide to fix it. The best way that I've been finding is to use the audio and the video to try and sync it up as much as you can. So the way that I've been doing this is that we get the far right clip, go to inspector, and I'm just going to set the opacity down. I'm going to lift this up and drag it over. I'm going to get this playhead so that we can see the double effect. Now what we're going to do now is we can actually try and line up the audio as best we can, which fingers crossed it might. I think it's so if we get the audio, I'm just not going to play it obviously, but if we pump that audio up there, and if we do the same with this clip, we can, fingers crossed, see more of the audio to be able to match this. So if we just move, crap, what have you done? So if I move out, no, this is, it's not as bad as it looks. I did just lose my place, so there we go. Right, so I drag this along. That looks like it's reasonably. I'm just going to get that audio back down now because it's stupidly loud. So we are, if you notice, the video is slightly out, so we are slightly out of sync. So I will move this along until it matches. So now they are one clip. Well, they are in sync effectively. So if we get that, and then I'm just gonna sort the opacity out with that. And what we want is a point at which we, in between these two, is to cut the first part off. So let's get this done. Let's get the cut tool. Let's make a cut here. So I'm switching between B and A on a PC. Now B is the cut tool, and A is the selection. And if you want to toggle off this, it's N for the snapping. So if you press N, you get the snapping back. Press A, it goes back to the selection tool. So if we get rid of that, and then drag that down, get the snapping back off. Fingers crossed. There we go. So now that we have got that in sync, we can then use this timeline in the master. So to recap what we've done, if you're having trouble seeing the audio, pump up the volume on each of the tracks so that you can see the waveform. This will allow you to actually line things up to a good degree. You want to set the opacity of the clip that you're trying to seamlessly move into. You're going to drop that down to about 50%. And then between the audio and the actual frame, you're going to move it left or right so that you get that in sync. So as you saw before, we were slightly out of sync. You could see that within the opacity, and getting it back in, we are fine now. So this, when we go back to the master and we load this timeline, so now that we have this here, what we're going to do, we're just going to click the N10 and we're going to drag this in on top. Once my PC decides to catch up, I'm just gonna put that there, turn that on. Right, so now we have both the clips that we want, but we're not quite done here. Now, as you can see, the G7 is 2 clips, but that is actually the full video, whereas this needs to be 3 clips in order to be the same length. And that's something you're gonna have to deal with when you're working with these things. Now, if you notice down by here, we've got spikes in the audio. So now we need to sync everything up. So like we did in the first clip, we are gonna wanna literally move things along. And so if we move this up just a little bit, we're just gonna zoom in and we're gonna move things along. Like that. So right, so what I'm doing with that, the whole reason why we've done the click is that it is a spike within the audio, and this makes it very easy for us to be able to sync between the two manually. So it gives us a good cue. Now the G7 is on the bottom and the N10 is on the top, so we know that the N10 is slightly ahead. So I'm just gonna zoom in so we can see this much more clearly. So if I move the timeline, so there's the clicks on move it there, that's the G7. Now I'm just going to move, crap, wrong one, just going to move that there. There we go. Now the downside, because we are not using the multicam setup, this is where you're going to have to do the manual editing part yourself. So you literally got to decide how you want this. Now we have the audio from both cameras. Now I'm just going to unlink the Note 10 so that we're just playing with one audio clip. We've also got this at the start where it's not quite syncing up, so we can get it there, cut it in the empty space, right click and say ripple delete. That'll shift everything over. Now this is not the actual start of the video, so if I slowly get down, so I'm just going to cut it by there. Boom. And then again we're going to ripple delete, so we are in sync. This is going to be complicated if you got more than one camera, obviously two cameras. So in the instance of doing the S9, the Note 10 and the G7, it was literally a case of going through and deciding what I wanted where. So in this instance, it was going to be the G7, and then if we set the opacity back, it'll go to the Note 10. So if you wanted to switch back to another camera, you have to literally cut, go back to the selection tool and move until the point you want. And you have to keep doing this for all the cameras and the type of edit that you want. So when you play through, so we'll just make this shorter. This is just me pausing, so there we go. So it can be done, and it's a manual process, and this is the way that I had to do it the first time. Obviously I had the 3 cameras, which meant that I had to completely go through this time and time again. I might show you the actual file. Actually, yeah, let's do that with that. Right, so we're at the video now where I did the original edit. So as you can see, this was synced, the actual bed audio was synced to the G7. That's been muted. Well, actually no, I had to sync that in the same manner as I did the G7 and everything else. Obviously there's a better way of doing it, but this is showing you what I was doing between syncing between the different cameras. So this is just to give you an idea of the pain that I went through. So I've kept the G7 as the main one on the bottom, and then in the timelines it was a case of cutting out the ones that I didn't want, or which cameras that I wanted to switch to, because obviously this is on top, this is going to show the S9, when I didn't want to see the S9 and I wanted to see the Note 10. You cut that away and you've just got this video. And again, whatever is not showing on these 2 timelines is showing the G7. So that's the thing you've got to take into consideration. The audio, if you don't have anything that will allow you to do timestamps, because that's something I've not managed to work out how to do that myself because of the S9 and the mobile phones and using the G7, so I've had to rely on syncing with the audio. You got to be very, very mindful that the audio that you're taking is excellent across the 3 cameras, and you have to have really good audio cues like clicks or claps in order for you to be able to sync these up. So I hope you found this useful. Please like and subscribe, please leave a comment and let me know what you think.